Ayin Beis, Volume 1, middle of chapter 108. So we're discussing Laban. So the beginning of this chapter, well, this is all in context of the whole story where we began the third interpretation of Sfira from the word Even Sapir, which means a like transparent or clear or radiant stone. Explaining the difference between crass and between levushim and kelim. Basically, one being attached and revealing, the other being detached and concealing. And this led us into the final discussion at the end of the last Maimer Vayetze. This is the story of Yaakov and Laban, and so on. That basically, when Yaakov and Laban they finally part ways, so they part by making a covenant. And then the Pasha Vayetze, where Yaakov makes a matzeva, takes one stone and makes a little marker from it, and Laban in turn takes a bunch of stones and makes a mound. And the significance of this is basically the two interpretations in Laban, which of course are the two interpretations in this gal, in this parsa, the cloak or the curtain, and that is that Lavan of Gedusha would be, the root of Lavan would be Levana Elyon, supernal whiteness, which is like Kesed, higher than Atzilus. And the Gal then is the parsa that's necessary from Bligvul to go into Gvul, requires as he said, the example of parsa is like AC is built to Musudarim, like a chida, a riddle, where communication has to be scrambled, disorganized, but it's still of the same personality, like he says, it's like engraved letters. And then there's Lavan, as it's nishtalshel below, there's Lavan lamata, meaning klipas nega, biyah, and that Lavan is lower than Atzilus. And that's the parsa between from Atzilus to biyah. That parsa is not just disorganized letters, it's also, being that the Atzilus, the kelim of Atzilus are like the Ashis of Atzilus, the words of Atzilus, letters of Atzilus are like written words. So now the parsa is a concealer, not a revealer. What does it mean? I mean a concealer more than the parsa before Atzilus. So a concealer in the sense that here, Lavan doesn't want to have the Kedusha, doesn't want to have the bittul to godliness, to the elikus, to the divine. So the parsa is to separate holiness from the opposite of holiness.
What's Yaakov's role?
What was Yaakov's role in the first one? No, Lavan does both parsas.
Okay.
In both cases, Lavan makes the gal. The question is, Yaakov's role is beyond that. Yaakov's role is to pierce the parsa. Yaakov didn't make the parsa.
Right,
Lavan made the parsa.
Yaakov's always trying to be mamshich to b'ligvul to gvul. Through the parsa?
Yaakov's role is, first of all, Yaakov, the beginning of his role is to just work with Lavan's sheep and draw a divine into the existence. That's
he's trying to draw that into Atzilus.
Hold on 1 second. That's a general Yaakov. Like he said, that's what Yaakov does in general. That's even before there's a parsa. There's nothing. We're not talking about anything right now. That's the whole role of Yaakov in general. Like he said, Yaakov in the parentheses, he said, basically, he's revealing everything before the parsa, higher than the parsa. All the levels of revelation. Then comes, as he says afterwards, there's exact basis.
Before he was even...
But there's no parsa before.
Right.
They didn't make this thing. Then there's another thing. When they part ways, after Yaakov did his long Aveda of drawing down elikus in all ways possible, higher than the parsa, like he said, like the ways, the beginning of creation, when Malchus is on the highest level, etc.
Like a beginning of creation, even before the...
Remember, no, I don't see what you're going with. If you're listening to what I'm saying, you wouldn't have any issue. I know exactly what we're talking about here. There's no parsa here. So, Atzilus, basically Yaakov is Aveda. They don't even know the pasuk of Lavan. Yaakov's job is to draw down Elikus. Atzilus, draw down Elikus into the world. That's the role of Atzilus. Yaakov is like the kelim and the kelim of Malch, and the kelim and the Eres should all be aligned. So all the work of Yaakov with Tzayin is that Aveda, that work. Tzayin is from the word Yitziyah, and he draws down all the hamshachas, whatever it may be. Bli gvul, gvul, all the levels we spoke about before. It's captured actually in the story of Evan Hazais, that before he starts his trip to Charan, he takes this Evan, which he calls the Nekuda, that's Malchus. He draws into it a Gilead, makes a matzeva. Then he also pours oil on it. He doesn't mention that right here. And he makes it, and this should be Beis Elikim, that Malchus should have even the pnimi atzma. So you have all the levels right here. Malchus, which is Kalim, let's put it like that, containers, limited containers, Misper, Sfira has Misper. He draws into Malchus, that Malchus should have also higher than just Misper, also Sipur, if you want to use those Asias, the meaning also Eris. And then Be'il, Beis Elikim, then also Behiris. Yeah, you can say all three right here. What's Beis Elikim like? It'll be lost, because if you remember, what he said was Ma'adenu Zenu, that Malchus, which begins just as a limited revelation, all in Atzilus, that Malchus should be on the level of the Vovke should be like Yutke. That's Yiyah. That is a taste of that was by Yaakov. That was the beginning that came later by Matan Torah. And Lost Love will be the full manifestation of that. That's Yaakov's Aved. That's in general. Got that? Clear?
Yeah, I got
Okay. Now comes another episode. That was Yaakov's Aved from his whole trip to Charan. What's Charan? Charan is Tachtenim. It's the lowest of worlds. That's where it's Charan, Charenaf. And Yaakov comes there to build his family. Is basically the Aveda of going into a low world and bringing all of Elikus. And that's the Aveda with Tzayin. Whose Tzayin is it? It's Lavan Elyon. So he's drawing down from Lavan Elyon, Lavan, the root of Lavan, into Akudim, Nekudim, Riyah, Biyah, HaKlolim, and so on. And that's where he takes this. Okay. Now comes another Pasha. He finishes Aveda there. He's going back to Yisrael now. So now comes Lavan pursues him, and they make this covenant, this deal, where he builds the matzeva and he builds, based on what Ayin Beis, the matzeva is very similar to the first matzeva that he built. So that's he doesn't yet now go into why he made a matzeva and gal. Lavan responds by building a gal. So what's the role of this gal now? This is the progression. So the role of the gal is two roles. If you're talking Lavan Elyon, meaning Lavan like that, the role of the Gal that Lavan is building now is to limit the flow into Atzilus. Like he says, because from Gvul to Bli Gvul, what happened here, like he says, the Pasuk we do Shanasis Mesis action built him Sundays. Why is that? In order, because of the flow went without any parsa, without any veil, without any shroud, without any curtain, Atzilus could not exist. How does it fit into the whole thing? So he says, so B'chlolos, that's the parentheses. Yaakov already did that Veda. But B'protius now we're talking already now, the engaging between Lavan and Yaakov is talking already the Veda now in Seder V'Hadragin. Not what Yaakov was doing till now. In Seder V'Hadragin, now you need to have a much more defined. We're not talking about now a taste of La'asad Laveh. We're not talking about a higher level dimension. That will be discussed. That was Yaakov's intention, to make a matzeva. Lavan, talking about Lavan of Kedusha. He's not doing something bad. He's doing something positive. What's he positively doing? He's saying, okay, now we have to draw this down into a structured existence. We have to go back to reality. Yaakov, when his Aveda concluded everything, it was a taste of La'asad Laveh, a taste of Matan Torah. It was a preparation for the whole future of all Aveda. All levels of spheres. It was a type of like he said, B'tchilas. That's why it was so important to say it was like B'tchilas Habriya. He was like realigning everything the way it's meant to be. But now we have to go now into the Aveda. The bottom line in our lives is an organized one. In an organized one, Atzilus cannot have all those Giluyim. They're not ready for it yet. So what happens now? That's what he makes the Pasa in this case to limit the flow from Bli Gvul to Gvul, but it's still divine. Right, that's the Pasa. Now comes the next step. Love. Now, what about the other side? That's in so-called in the positive side. Then there's the negative side. The negative side, that love and love klippa. That's the second interpretation. Because we're not just dealing with a world of limitation, we're also dealing with a world that defies godliness. So what's LABAN'S role here? So here it's obviously far, far more complicated. And that is that he wants to pick a parsa that conceals the divine, and he says, you stay in Kedusha, and I don't want to have bittul, I don't want to subjugate myself, sublimate myself to you. That's the bottom line.
So at first when the Yaakov wanted to bring in all the areas of
the read these A's, he says ubetchila. He says exactly those words. Page Reish Vav 206. Ubetchila himshich Yaakov bechinas leven el in giluyim eres atzmim shlei bechinas tzimtzum klal.
Into Atzilos.
Into all the worlds, all the way down below. Ki do it in say love bechinas tzim etzma taynig apos vimshich. Go on. V'am shachas yet termitz. This is klal termitz atzma said in itself.
This includes also Atzilos.
Everything. Inyan. Then comes the Ina Gal Pashan Asazal and the Jacobson Ed say the Shtalshlos. That's the point. So Yaakov is, it's, I think of it like this, like I said, Matan Torah did really two things. It gave us a power that would transform, give us the power to change everything. So what Matan Torah, a one-time thing, did not continue. It was all the Giluyim that Vayered Hashem HaSinai. Matan Torah didn't even retain Kedusha at the end. But at that moment, it's like a Chanukah Sabayis. When you launch something, you have to give it all the power. So Yaakov gave all that power while he was working, did 20 years. What was he doing for 20 years? All the maklis. He was bringing on all the levels. He was giving us like the power that later would play itself out. Then comes the actual so-called story starts. Now he goes back to Eretz Yisrael, and now we have to bring him down with Seder HaDraga. That's why that parenthesis is so vital. Yeah. Now remember, afterwards, Yaakov also has the power to bring from higher than the past. That's why Yiboka. That was the word Yiboka. Where was the words Yaakov Zeshi Yiboka? That he pierces. Where was that expression? Somewhere on page Reish Vav. For some reason I can't find it now.
I'm sure it's here.
Oh, here it is. Okay, here it is. Yeah. Yaakov says, right before the parentheses. That's what he says here. So he says, Azar Pasha, that's the Pasha. There shouldn't be more bleak vulshin. So so that's already Yaakov in working in the world of structure. So basically there's two parallel tracks going on here. Okay. Now, so now where we are now is he's going to explain this whole thing. So he's starting with Zelu Umazeh Asalakim. To understand Lavan and Yaakov, you have to really understand two parallel forces. So Yaakov, as the spheres, the Gedusha, as he explained, 10 spheres in Atzilus are mamish united. Both the Eris and Kalim. The Eris are united in the level of Yachid. The Kalim are united in the form of Echad. So the Eris are mamish oneness. Think of it like you don't even sense distinction. And the Kalim, there's distinction, but there's total harmony. Now but in Biyah, you can't say Iyu v'chayu echad v'gamu echad like he said, but it's still, as he said, the neshama of Biyah is also still divine. And the Eris of Nefesh Ruach are nivra, but they're all aligned. It's like the body to the soul. So if in this case, if Atzilus is like the neshama, and neshama has Eris and Kalim, the Kalim of Atzilus are the Guf. And the Guf is aligned. So Esesrir is the bottom line. Through all of Ishtalshlus, even B'ri Yitzir Asiyah are still Kedusha. It's only the Levushim that create that concealment. Because remember, we learned earlier that Kalim in general are still attached, whether they're the faculties or they're the body. So basically here he's saying the Kalim not only of Atzilus is going even further, the Kalim even B'chlal are Kedusha. They maintain that. So the B'tachas HaKedusha, B'tachas HaYichud. Now it says, the other side of it, there's also 10 spheres. But here it's Pirud. The kelim, even of biyah, are achdus, meaning they're aligned with their purpose. They may not be united with their purpose, but they're still aligned. Think of it like if you're running a business. So you have the person who's on top, and he knows exactly every detail of the business, is completely aligned with the mission. And then he has people working for him. They may not be as united with the mission, but they're still doing their job faithfully. They're just a step away from the source. So if you ask them, they say, we don't know exactly the whole purpose, but we're doing what we have to do. So you could have loyal workers, even though Atzilus is like the engine room. Their Eris and Kelim are mamish aligned, it's exactly from the top. In Biyah, you already have instruments and tools, but they are also aligned with the purpose. But they're creatures that are aligned. They're workers that are aligned, not the leaders, so to speak. But Lumazeh is the opposite. Lumazeh is workers that are rebelling, that are not going with the program. They're not following what the plan was. That's Pirud. Pirud means they have their own agenda. They're not reflecting the unified purpose for which they were created. That's Lumazeh. So he says, so what's Lumazeh? Chachamim heim l'hora. They're Chachamim, but it's not for the right purpose, it's for evil. They're conspiring for their own interests, selfish interests. How do they have this power? So it comes from that comes from Kedusha. The Kedusha, they glean their energy from holiness. But like he says, not from the Kalim themselves. You can't take it from the Kalim because the Kalim are still Kedusha. So you have to get it from the Sidus. You have to basically get it from the Levushim. You have to get it from outside forces. Okay? In other words, if there were no garments that were detached, there'd be no way for them to really get energy. Basically, there'd be no independent reality as we know it. Because Kalim themselves, you could conceal. Levushim are where the concealment really becomes big time. So therefore you could have people going against defying. Okay. And that's where love comes from. We're talking about love and lamata. The love and lamata comes from the klippa, from that shlamata ma'parsha. And he says his love is both chochmah the klippa, and it also says kesed the klippa, which means he's the intensity of klippa. He's not just, when you say malchus, for example, of klippa, you mean like the lowest level. So think of it like the foot soldiers. As soon as you say Kesser of Klippa, you're talking level of Amalek. Reish is going Amalek. What does it mean? You're talking now the root of Klippa. So that, for example, in even someone who's opposed to holiness or opposed to what God wants, you could have someone who's just doing, he's mechanical. He's like a foot soldier. He goes along because everybody's doing it. But then there are people who are the real plotters, who are the real Yudayas Rebbeinu Mechavid Limred Bay, for example. He knows the master, and he intentionally plots against him. So Lavan is a root of Klippa, not a root. He doesn't say root, he says take of a Klippa. Intense Snagdus. Why? Because it's rooted, well, why? He doesn't say root. Just like in Gedusha Levan Elian Pshitas Atzmus, it's coming from a high place, the Klippa is also takeoff. So in other words, that's exactly why. Because he's rooted in such a high level, so when he comes down in the opposite, he's also very high, very powerful. As we know, everything that is powerful, no matter whether it's positive or negative, means it's coming from a very high source. Like you can say by Bilam, Navi Yisrael Kamesha, but Bilam was not Yisrael, was on the level of Moshe, so he was on a very high level because that's a real Zel Umazeh. For there to be a battle, there has to be equal forces. That's why when the Rebbe explains the chessboard, the chess game in Aveda. The black and the white have exactly the same pieces. There's a total equality. You have to begin with two equal sides. That makes it possible for there to be an Aveda work, and for us to achieve something in refining the world. Yeah. So what is it in Aveda? It says this is Rotzen v'tainug, the desires and the pleasures of Elam Hazeh, of Lumazeh, Kamei hashakua b'yeser. Someone, this is Tifa Zunkin. Deeply, submerged, sunk into the desire, taavos. Taavos is more than tainug. It's not just pleasure. Taavos is lust. Taavos is indulgence. Yeah, but taavos. We all know what taavos are. Tainugim pshutim, hagashmim. We'll soon talk about COVID. Bottom line is that the klippa of Lavan, just like his root in Kedusha, is not a simple root. It comes from the supernal whiteness, which he says, pshitus atzmos. As we'll learn later, Lavan is the color that is without a color. So it's not just, for example, if you have a klippa of chesed, that's Yishmael. So his negativity is in one kav. He gives too much. Doesn't have limits. If you have Esav, Yotzim Memenu Esav, from Yitzchak, that's the klippa of Gvura. So it's a klippa in one kav. He's too much Gvura. When you talk about a klippa of Lavan, you're talking about not just one chesed or Gvura. You're talking about Pshit. In Kedusha, it's Lavan. Lavan is all the colors, or beyond all colors. So he's like in every area. So the same thing is Lavan and klippa. It's not just a one little thing. It's coming from makifim. It's coming from, like you said, fazunkenkai. The person is submerged in desires and pleasures of the opposite side. That is a far deeper klippa. I'm just summing it up, and then we'll continue. So this is Zelu Mazeh, that Lavan, that fell, as we said, it doesn't just descend. It's like scattered after the shattering of the vessels. Think of it like scattered. So it's a deeper darkness. So he said this was Sag Lamata Mishema that fell into Ban. I explained that the names.
That only happens on the bad side. Doesn't happen on the good side.
Shvius HaKelim?
Yeah.
Well, there's a good intention in it. Seiser Amnas Livnes. The shattering is not for a bad purpose. It's in order for us to elevate them. Yeah. So I don't know what you mean by the bad. There's no bad and good in this sense. What happens is like this. Look, let's go before the tzimtzum. When there's only divine presence, only divine consciousness, and there's no independent reality, meaning there's no tzimtzum, there's no room for any tachtenim. There's nothing that is outside of that presence. No, there's no such thing as going against it. Think of it like unity prevails everywhere. So as soon as you have the tzimtzum, which conceals it all, now you have the emergence of, we'll call it independent consciousness. More specifically, Adam and Chava, before they ate from the tree, they were aligned completely to what God wants.
So the Lavan was originally the Lavan.
Hold on, one second. Then comes a concealment now, concealment alone only does that much. Then there's another jump, which is Shvius HaKelim. It's not just a concealment, there's a radical explosion. Okay? This explosion is a result of the imbalance. There's an imbalance going on after the tzimtzum. Because after the tzimtzum, everyone knows, consciousness knows, the eris are imbalanced, the kelim are imbalanced. Because they are both coming into place. And before the tzimtzum, there's no imbalance. The imbalance comes once you conceal the source. So everyone, to put it in a little more dramatically, every entity is looking for its purpose. They really don't know what they're supposed to be doing, so to speak, because there's a misalignment going on, because the source has hidden itself. Now, Eir obviously always feels its source, but Eir can be very intense. What happened with the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva? They were great scholars. They're an example of Eiris of Teo. But they were so great, they didn't know how to coexist. So they shattered each other. They destroyed each other. They died as a result because of their great energies, because it wasn't aligned. It was like someone who's so intense, like Nadav and Avihu, who ran into the Beis Hamikdash, a Ratzeh without a Shuv. So there's a deep yearning. This could only happen after the Tzimtzum, because before the Tzimtzum, everything is aligned. There's no such thing. There's no really yearning and so on. After the Tzimtzum, you conceal, then even Eir, in good intentions, could end up being destructive. Understand? Tayu is where it all comes to a head, basically. The Eiris are intense, the containers are not mature yet, so there's no balance, and you have a shattering of containers. This is, psychologically, you can find this in people's lives, when there's any type of dissonance. Tayu is, in psychological terms, ultimate dissonance. A dissonance that creates a shattering. When a person plots, when people just lose it. That's Tayu in psychological terms. What are they losing? There's a certain lack of balance. They have an overwhelming experience and they don't know how to contain it. So it could be a lot of energy. Or they have a lot of hunger and they're very creative and they're very frustrated. I'm just giving you examples. Or you can have the opposite. You could have that. You have a lot of frustration. You don't have any tools. You see people, for example, who have tantrums. You often see this with children who don't have the tools to express themselves. They just go crazy. They like that. Yeah. In other words, whenever there's an imbalance, you're going to have some type of shattering, an outburst, if you want to put it that way. That outburst is using now. Remember, we're not talking here in time. It's not a world that shatters. We're talking here a state of being. That shattering is always happening because it's basically, it's almost, that's why I call it a market correction. It's almost telling us there's something not wrong, there's something imbalanced. There's something imbalanced in the equation. So Toyu is actually doing us a service. It's like that. It's like, you know what happens when a circuit breaker. Why does a circuit breaker break? Because it's telling you there's a surge and it's stopping something from happening. So before it creates a, God forbid, a fire, it closes down the current. So Toyu is essentially that type of stop gap. That's like almost like a warning. And what happens as a result? So it shatters. So in the mashal, shattering means containers shatter, they scatter. In our language, it means we come into this world and we have no clue. We live in a world where, what am I supposed to be doing? Where are my sparks? And they're all over the place. So it's literally like somebody writing a book, which is a beautiful story, then they tear all the pages into pieces, and they scatter it all over, and they say, go ahead, now gather and find the story. This is when we look for Hashgacha Pratis, the story of Purim. 9 years Purim spanned. If you lived at the time, you had no clue that one thing is connected to the next. Achashverosh is the king and happens to get angry at his wife, and then Bigsan and Viserys make a plot, and then Mordechai happens to overhear it, then the king happens to have insomnia one night. All seemingly random things. But then you connect the dots, you start seeing a story. This is an example where we come and we gather the pieces of the shattered containers. That's our Aveda. So when you go, wherever you go in your life, you travel somewhere. You come there and you do something for the right purpose, not just for your own purpose, for your own needs. You're gathering together the sparks that were allocated to you. So each of us right here, every person on this earth, was given a certain amount of sparks to gather. That will be the places you will travel in your life, the people you know, your skills, your talents. Each of us have different ones. And now of course, initially there were 288 sparks, but they broke into many details, so it became billions of sparks. That's the world that we live in. And every time you align something, you take a few things, and you align it into the purpose for the kavanah, Shem Echad, you are reconnecting. That's tikkun of Toyu. That's really literally what means tikkun ha'olam. Everybody uses that term. You're repairing broken pieces, and you're realigning them. However, obviously, it's not just going back to square one. Right. Now, those sparks and those scattered containers have very high roots, because they came from a very high level. So when you rebuild it, you're doing something greater than just, rebuilding a Humpty Dumpty, whatever. Again, you're actually reaching higher levels. That's why he says, Sag is higher than Ma. The tikkun is a lower level than Toyu. But in tikkun, you have the kavanah, the power to correct Toyu. So Lavan, when he falls down, he falls deep. He comes from Lavan Elyon. Shviras HaKelim caused Lavan to shatter, so to speak. And now what do you have? A Lavan down below that's very shrewd, very cunning, a powerful force. Look what we say in the Haggadah. That what Lavan wanted to do was even worse than Pare. He wanted to Pare only the Scharim, only the male. And Lavan wanted to erase everybody. Wanted to annihilate all the Jews. So the whole Yaakov is everything. So bottom line is, that's Lavan of Klippa.
The higher it is, it seems like it goes down.
That's the rule. The exact example, Chassidus gives the example. You have a wall, the stones on top of the wall fall the farthest place. Lavan, absolutely, yeah.
So those of us that call ourselves that have any goodness, because we didn't start off so high as the bad guys.
No. First of all, there's no bad. Let's make something clear. The good and bad is all in you. There's nothing outside of you. You have a Lavan in you, and you have a Yaakov in you. Everything is within us. Everything is within us. Yeah, because it's not the evil. Is not even the tzimtzum is not evil. The tzimtzum is the absence of the divine presence. The evil is when we start taking it seriously and give it power. Like I said yesterday, the bluff. You give the sheker power. A father hides from his child in order for you to be ingenious enough to find the father. The child stops looking and says, hey, my father's not here. I have my own agenda. That's when the problems begin. Bottom line is, Klippa, negative energy, is only the absence of holiness. There's no such thing as real evil. When does it become real? When we take the concealment and we give it power by acting on it. That's where the tragedies begin. We give it substance. That's why when you destroy a klippa, you're actually, it says, you make from heder mitzias. You're giving reality. When you deny a taiva, when you hold back from doing something negative, or you transform it through tshuva, you're actually making it a reality that it was meant to be, that it shouldn't be, because its reality is nothingness. A mitzvah, a positive kedusha, its reality is what you do. Klippa is what you don't do. When you act on it, you're giving heder, meaning basically a lack of mitzias by making it a mitzias, and now it becomes a real reality. This is also, by the way, helpful to understand Mashiach and so on, because that's even in days even before the end of Birurim. Klippa really, look, when you read the Sikha, it's unbelievable. Purim Tafresh Pei. The last Purim, when the Rebbe Rashab was sitting and Farbringing in Rostov, similar, but Tafresh Pei is unbelievable. And Purim, it's a few days. He passed away Beis Nissen, so we're talking about 2 weeks before his stalkers. And come in three Bolsheviks. And on the table was on Purim they made 3 times a year, Purim, Simchas Torah, and Discourse was a magbis. Simchas Torah they just pledged. A magbis, an appeal. And Purim was one of them. So there was in the middle of the table, it says there, a plate with money, which was like a state crime. You're raising money, etc. And 2 of these 3 people come in, and everybody got scared. They wanted to cover everything up. It's Purim. And the Rebbe Rashab says, I'm not the exact language, it's unbelievable. He says, he starts speaking. It's klippa's heder. Klippa has no substance at all. And if you ignore it, it disappears. If you give it credibility, if you pay attention to it, you make it a mitzias. And you have the power to make it a mitzias by giving it attention. So you have to completely ignore it, and it will disappear. And then they just walked out. It says that. It's in the Sikha, that they just walked out. And then he said the Maimer, Reish is Goyim Amalek. Purim, connected to Purim. Now, obviously that would be a great, why can't we just do that every time we have problems? I guess you have to have an Eis Ratzon, it was Purim and the Rebbe Rashab. It's not so simple. I know, the Holocaust came a few years later, so clearly it's not that easy. But the concept is definitely there. Now, had Adam and Chava just realized that, we wouldn't have all our problems. But this is the truth. The Gemara says in Sukkah. The Gemara says that Lasad Lave, when the Yetzer Hara was finally exposed, so the Tzaddikim will see it was a big mountain, and the Rishayim will see it was a little anthill. In other words, it wasn't what you thought it was. It looks far more powerful. It's a bluffer, basically. It projects more power than it does, and it has. It's the art of projection. What does it say by the Meraglim? When they come back, they say, Hayinu be'eneinu k'chagovim, v'chein hayinu be'eneihem. What does it mean? If you were small, you're objectively small. Chagovim is like insects, the grasshoppers. So they say no. They say we saw ourselves like little insects, and that's how we appeared to them. So the obvious question, what do you mean you appeared to them? That's how you were. They were giants, you were small. What is this, an objective reality? No, it's all about how you feel about it. If you feel you're small, then everybody will see you as small. That's the bottom line. That's the classic projection. It's all about the confidence you exude.
If you project weakness, then...
That's why by the Rebbe was not an issue. He said when people said to him, we don't have confidence, I don't know if I could do it. The Rebbe said, the Rebbe gave you keiches, do it. Even if you don't feel it, act that way, and then you'll listen, because the Rebbe knew that's the truth. It's your own fears that are not letting you see your own strengths. Remember, we all have the abilities. If you knew you're a chelik, I remember once by Fabrengen, the Rebbe yelling, he says, you're a chelik mamash, a piece of God himself. What do you mean you can't do it? How is that possible? So that's the Rebbe's attitude. So, that's of course a commander-in-chief speaks that way. But the rest of us are controlled by our fears. There's no question about it. That if you have that fearlessness, you can get a lot done. Fears of other people's acceptance, fears of failure, fears of this, fears of that. We all have our fears. Fear is a perfect example of the bluff of Olam Hazeh. Look what we're afraid of. What are we afraid of? People are afraid of losing money. People commit suicide because they lost money. Explain this to me. They're ready to give their lives because they lost money, as if money is more important. They can't take their money with them. But this is the illusion of this world. And we all are guilty of it in some way. We are subject to it. Anyway, I'm just trying to spell out let's call the anatomy of Elam Haza. So Elam Haza is both concealment, but also disorganized system. We don't see the sparks; they're all over the place. Now, the question when the Rebbe meant that the sparks are finished and Birudim are finished, I'll just mention it. It's not a contradiction to anything I said, because we're still living in the mentality of Golus. Even if it's all done, our mentality is still the same mentality we had 50 years ago and 20 years ago. And that's what the Rebbe's war is. Change your mentality. Because Mashiach could be here, but if we're all still with our psychology of yesterday, our minds are in Golus. Even if the Gula is, the illusion is what we create. But to go back to this discussion here, so.
Hashgacha is really just to lead us away from the illusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Hashgacha pratis is to realize the real story of our lives, not the diluted story that you think you have it figured out, 100%.
Does it ever happen that something good comes from higher than where love comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a constant dual story. Like, for example, you keep saying Eir reveals its source, but Kelim have a higher source than Eir. So it ultimately they both give to each other. It's like saying, you're really asking is, do tzaddikim have a mile over Bali Tshuva? The answer, of course, they have a mile. First of all, everything's rooted in Atzmus. The Baal Tshuva's mile, obviously, is that it can reach far lower and it transforms and so on. The mile of a tzaddik is that he's aligned with the source. So, if love, you're asking like this, if love and the Kedusha could fall into a place that does not become klippa, that's what you're asking. Well, when we talk about great neshamas, you're talking about tzaddikim. Moshe Rabbeinu comes from levels like that. Minamayim Mishasiel. Not everybody. So we talk about Moshe and Bilam. Moshe is higher than Bilam, but they're commensurate. They're proportionate to each other. The next question is, what determines? Why does this one fall into klippa and this one not? Look, Rabbi Yechon Kohen Gadol, Shimish Peishana, and then he became a tzduki. So here he had the choice. So you have both powers. He was great, and then he fell. Acher. So if you include Bechira into the picture, so clearly you could have a great soul that falls and makes. On the other hand, you have Rabbi Elazar ben Dedaya, spends the whole life the opposite, and he ends up last minute with a Bechira. So in other words, my point is that it is not predestined. Lavan, I'm not going to get into whether he had choice or not, I don't know about that. But he definitely, he's talking now Lavan B'Poel Mamish, he's Lavan of Klippa. Did Lavan himself have the ability to reach his Levin Elyon? I would assume he had it. And this is Yaakov did that job. Yaakov Esav is a good example. Who's higher? So Esav on one hand, Yaakov on the other hand. But Yaakov is the one that directs the brachas, that one day that Esav and him could unite. That's the goal. The Eir has to direct, the Kelim are the ones where the Kavanah is. That's more or less how it works. But they each inform each other. In Ayin Beis you'll find constant back and forth. The Kelim tell the Eir this, and the Eir tell the Keli this. It's a real dialogue. The bottom line, you need both. You need both. You need the things that fall into the negative, you need the things that fall into the positive. But Derech Klal Shviras HaKelim does not mean everything that fell from Shviras HaKelim is a negative thing. It just potentially could be negative, because it's scattered.
So Lavan didn't reach his true potential.
Well, the story isn't over yet, Yeah, well, look, he made a lot of tzaddis. But on the other hand, Lavan is the one that bore Rachel and Leah, wouldn't have been born without Lavan. So you could say Lavan is in a way grandfather of all of us. We all come from Lavan.
We're reaching Lavan's true potential.
Just like, in a sense, we're being misakim, we're repairing, like Terach, In some places like this, there's two ways to understand. So anyway.
So what was the agreement between them at the end of the day?
We're going now. That's what we're getting to get to now. Remember also, don't be disturbed by the fact that he's talking about two Lovins here, one in Kedusha and one in this. They're both true. It's not, the story of the Torah is true on two parallel tracks. And you see there's always, even Parei, it says sometimes he's Peru, Memnei Kol Nehurin. Sometimes Parei is considered to be the highest. Then he's Nachash HaKadmoni. Then he's like the what's it called, the Tanan HaGadol. the big serpent. Because that's how it is. Because remember, the Torah is a ruchnistic story. We're not talking here history. Like someone asked me after yesterday's class, so what about when we learn Chumash? Which Lavan are we talking about? The answer is both. This is Torah. Torah is not a history book, which is the technical Lavan. If the Torah tells us a story about Lavan, is because it wants to tell us a spiritual story of our lives. And this story is a double story. There's the root of it, and there's how it's down here. And most likely, Lavan below did not know about his source. It doesn't have to mean that he knew that he's rooted there.
But he had the potential to be there.
Well, he knew he had power. The question is how you use it. Look, he's not spelling out every detail, but maybe we can figure it out, because Lavan made the parsa. So now he's going to go to that. So now that we've established, this whole first half of the chapter established the behind-the-scenes explanation how Lavan came to be. So the Zela Umazah. So we have the 10 spheres of Kedusha. One second, we have the 10 spheres of Klippa in the negative. Lavan is the Chachma or Keser of the spheres of Klippa, of the negative, which is rooted in the Lavan Elyon in the highest levels. In simple terms, to use it again, psychological terms, when you see a person who's a real troublemaker, and you have people who are getting themselves into real trouble or cause a lot of trouble, very, very often you'll find that they're the most creative people of all.
Especially Bacham Mashiach.
They have a lot of energy, and when it's not harnessed and directed, it can cause a lot of damage. Mediocre people cause mediocre damage. That's the rule. Strong people, big people, cause big damage. So you have a lot of energy inside of you, and you don't know where to go with it. What's going to happen? Besides the shattering that you'll you'll just explode, or whatever the word is. Then the things that you could end up doing are far more destructive than someone who doesn't have such creativity.
Loose cannon.
Yeah, but it's worse than that. It's not just a loose cannon. It's a loose cannon with a lot of energy. Think of it like fire. Is fire good or bad? If it's controlled, it's good. If it's bad, it destroys, consumes. That's the key. Unfortunately, many of us we employ the tactic of putting out the fire or lowering it. That's not the goal. The goal is to harness it. That's the goal. You don't want to destroy energy. You want to harness it. If you lock up if you take a creative person and you lock them up and tie them up because they're being destructive, you're going to create much more damage. That person for sure. And then because what you're dealing is like bottling up energy that's going to have to plot. It's going to have to explode at some point. So the key is to have a harnessing, like a kettle. If you don't have a spout, it's going to implode and then explode.
You don't believe in Adderall or any of these things that the kids?
No, absolutely.
You don't believe in what?
The medication to calm the kids down.
Look, medication is a whole other discussion. They're over-medicated, it's over-diagnosed, etc. Today everything has a name. Right. Now, look, there are things that I'm sure that could be medically determined, fine. But a lot of it is not necessarily that. So here we go. So now we have Chachma. So here we go. Okay, now so we have the Torah Sag. So just think of Sag as the name of Hashem that creates this intense energy of Teyu. The Ma'ila Shema. Shema, as we know, is Tikkun, is Atzilus, that's Yaakov. Sheyarad v'nofel lamata is Ban denega. So this Sag, before the Shvir Sakem, Teyu, now fell through the shattering into Ban, which is Behema, Gematria of Nega. And interesting, Lavan is Lamed Ban. Lavan.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it says places, Lamed is the Shleishim Kelim, and the Ban. The Nega, Kaneda. Now he goes to the story. Now that we've established who Lavan is, there's some explanation that he didn't discuss earlier. Before he just said there's two levels. So now what's the story with the parsa, with the gal, with the mound that he built? For Lavan said the Klippa. Now this Lavan of Klippa, Osa gal beinei lebein hakdusha. He built a gal. He built a mound, a boundary, but not just a line. He built a mechitza, a heap, a mound is probably the best word. Beinei lebein hakdusha, between himself, it's in the Klippa, and holiness. What does this What was the intention? That it should not be revealed from these higher energies of Chachma, of Shema, of Atzilus, should not be revealed to below Be'echolis, the Nega. Echolis means the corridors, or chambers of Nega of Biyah. La'aleisam, to elevate them, elevate them, and to refine them, lichlal b'kedusha d'Atzilus, and to be encompassed of kedusha Atzilus. The purpose of Lavan of Shviras HaKelim is, think of it like this. Let's spell it out again, using the same example. Today you encounter a situation. You meet somebody or a situation. How are you going to behave? Are you going to do a mitzvah with this? Are you going to bring some kedusha in this situation, or are you going to just be neutral, or are you going to allow the selfishness or the greed to prevail? So there's a battle going on. Yaakov Atzilus wants to use the situation that fell from Shviras HaKelim for kedusha. Lavan is fighting, no, you stay where you are. I don't want to be elevated in your thing. I have my own agenda. That's what he's saying, basically, in simple English. So he builds a gal, a boundary. Don't come here. I don't want to be involved in your sacred or holy activities, basically. When we eat a piece of bread, so it says, lechem apumchar b'lechel. You're eating lechem from the word milchama. Bread comes from the word milchama. What's the milchama? There's a spark in there that fell from Shviras HaKelim, from Tayu. The spark is in the bread. It's not interested in becoming part of you. So there's a battle you have to fight. It's not a physical battle, but it's a battle where you have to extract the bread. Sometimes it says the digestion process is that. It's a whole process. You have to get rid of the waste, get rid of the externals to get that spark out, to turn it into blood that becomes part of your system. So for that you need to make a bracha, you have to make sure you eat the right thing, you wash your hands, and then it becomes you, and you use that strength to do something positive. So there's a war going on. That's why they say some places it says that's why they tear a challah. It's like a Muhammad type of thing. Lechem. To tear it. Yeah. Huh? B'tzias apas, right. And you know the Rebbe Rashab, the story, he was once given soup with lokshen, with noodles. He put the spoon in, he tried to lift it, the noodles slipped out. Once, twice, 3 times. So he said quietly, Nachnish great. The lokshen is Nachnish great. She didn't say lokshen, he says, he's Nachnish great. That she's not ready yet. The spark, or he, is not ready yet to be elevated. So for most of us, it's just a matter of, the spoon, so it slips out, so we keep working at it. And here, the Rebbe Rashab understood that the bir is not ready for the birur. So there's a battle going on all the time. It's a subtle battle, but this battle is essentially like the battle between Yaakov and Lavan. Lavan brings a wall and says, stay where you are, leave me alone, basically. I have my own business to deal with. It doesn't want to elevate in Kedusha. I mean, it's simple as that. That's the gal. Yeah, it's a block. Exactly correct. It's like someone closing my ears. I don't want to hear. Shariyesh birurim lamata b'tainuga elam hazah shemizbarim ve'elam lamayla de hatera v'ayde kima mitzvahs. He's now explaining. Because there's birurim lamata, there are in tainuga elam hazah. When you have pleasure in elam hazah, even in food, there's a reason you have pleasure. The Baal Shem Tov actually says the reason some of us like certain foods and other people like other foods is because our soul is attracted to the sparks in these foods and not in those foods. He says that even about physical, people you like physically that look to you, appealing to your eye, it's because your neshama senses the nitzutz. It's not for a gushim dika reasons. That's what he says, clear.
Beauty is not in the beholder, that's what it means. It's a whole new dimension.
Right. So in other words, this is what it says. What is the lashon there? The story that Rebbe tells about Chana, when she cried for a child. So Eli said to her, the Kohen, the Haftarah of Rosh Hashanah, that classic sikha from the Rebbe. I remember when the Rebbe said it was Tav Shalom and Hey. It was unbelievable. He was crying. It was the second day of Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe told the story. He said, well, yeah. So Eli said to her, what are you doing here? You're a shikr, because he saw her mumbling without saying anything. And she said, what do you mean a shikr? I'm pouring my soul out to God. And the Rebbe spoke about this because what the Rebbe said, Eli, a Kohen Gadol, didn't realize a woman standing in the base of English and mumbling, she must be praying. Why would he think she's drunk? Because he saw that she was praying for her own needs, for a child. So she's drunk in Gashmis, meaning she was drunk with her own indulgence. And she's saying, you think I'm asking for me for a child? I'm asking a child because to be able to dedicate the child to God. In other words, the Rebbe said when a Jew asks for Gashmis, he's really asking for Ruchnis. That was the Nukudah. This is the same Baal Shem Tov. So even though you, in your mind, may be thinking you're thinking of Parnasa, but the truth is your Neshama wants the sparks within the Parnasa, even if you don't know it. This is why we say that Rabbi Machabed Ashirim. How can Rabbi Huda Nossi was suddenly is honoring the wealthy? So he said because wealthy means that God blessed them with opportunities. So he's honoring the opportunities that God blessed them with, and that they have the wisdom that God trusts them that they will use the money well. In other words, it's always the sparks that you value. Now, some of Rabbeinu HaKadish's grandchildren forgot about the sparks part. I mean, today in our generation, I'm saying some people honor the wealthy not for the sparks, but for other reasons. But that's where it's rooted in.
Laban was looking inside Yaakov's mouth. Is unconsciously going to the sparks also, or
That's what it says by Esav. That what is the lashon? Huh? Avi Shekeu. What was Befiv? Tzayda Befiv. That's what it says. Yeah, that was connected to that. Look, lechem is also the word cholam, a dream. Lechem is bread, war, or dream. There's a lot of these words. Also, davening is like a mochama. We say, the expression is, it's shas shleisa, shas kirva. It's a time of war. There's a war going on, my friends, all the time. The war is over now. Now the war is for our consciousness. Let's make that clear. Yeah. So anyway, so here's go. How do you elevate them? These bidurim, elevate them through Torah and through kima mitzvahs, b'dvarim gashmim. When you do a mitzvah with the dvarim gashmim, with physical things, you are elevating that physical. And specifically through tshuva. Because tshuva, obviously, you were in a very dark place, and then you elevated through returning. Now he's speaking, he's going through the whole birurim thing. There's birurim mamat lamayla. This was mamayla lamata, obviously. Because you bring Torah down, mitzvahs, and tshuva. Then there's mamat lamayla, they have the tefillah. So he's covering everything here, all the kavim. Torah, tefillah, Torah, mitzvahs, mils chasadim, tshuva, and now tefillah. What's tefillah? Shamaylim basus l'tata mehicholos deneged debiyah latzilis. You elevate through your initiative below to the hecholos. You said chambers. I said, what did I say? Corridors. Okay. Of neiga the biyah latzilis. You elevate them to latzilis. What? Bechinas netzutz is the kedusha shenafel l'sham. The sparks of kedusha that fell. So let's go back again. The sparks scattered. They're in everything you do, in the food you eat, in the place, in the work you do, in the money you have, in the people you know, in the beautiful things you are drawn to. They're everywhere. But they're trapped there. They're hostage. That's why we say birur netzutzes. What means birur? Birur means to separate. That's what birur is. Avedis habirur, Shabbos. You separate. You're separating the spark that became trapped as hostage in the Gashmis, and you want to free it. So we say birur, zichuch, aliyah. These are all levels of how you free a spark and you elevate it back to where it belongs. And of course, then you do that, you achieve a lot more than what was there before. Right. So this is all the birurim. This, by the way, is all lashon of the Mitla Rebbe in that Maimer, the Chasna Maimer I mentioned yesterday. Like Avram's nefesh asher asa b'cham, Avram Achav and Sarah, Megayres ha'anoshim u'megayres ha'anoshim. Ba'ageirim shegayir Avram. So what's anefesh asher asu? What do you mean he made them? So it says because Gershon is guy could cut and shanel them. He's like he gave birth to them. That's the so geirim. So nefesh asher asu b'charon means that besides him and his family, he also came with all the geirim. What's a geir? What's the meaning of a geir? A stranger, a spark that fell into a strange place. That's why this what it says Gershon is guy, not Goshen is guy. because he's not a goy. He's a spark of a Jew that fell into a goyish structure, and that's why we say goy should get it's a nitzutz. Yeah.
I was trying to get him. There's no such thing. There's no tailor. There's no gated. It means monotheism.
Okay, there's different meaning, different opinions there. But then Lefi Erech, then Avram also was not a Jew.
Yeah.
If you go like that, so Lefi Erech Avram.
It's the concept of one God.
That's one way to put it. No, but I'm saying Avram, and what about Avram? Was Avram Jewish? What means he was Megayer? Avram was also Megayer himself. Gir then was basically theological.
Convinced them to.
Until it came to Matan Torah, when it became technical, so to speak. There's different svarim. There's the Nicola svarim that talk about the get the davdavke. Depends. Before Matan Torah, the whole category of Jew and non-Jew is different. If after Matan Torah, everyone lives in Matan Torah is Bnei Neach. But Bnei Neach is look, we're all born from Adam and Chava. Is Chava a Jewish mother? But that's why everyone became. There was a gators by Matan Torah. There's a lot discussed on this thing. Okay, however you explain it. The point he wants to make is that never that he's elevating sparks. Here, by the way, here's an example. You asked about Lavan. Here you have examples of the Lumas of Lavan. They were all Gadim. In Rabbi Akiva, there's two opinions whether he was a Ger or was a son of Gadim. But Rabbi Meir was a Ger, Shmai v'Avtalya were Gadim. He says Neshamas Gavoyas, the great Neshamas of these people. V'chein b'nevim ke'avadya, and also by the prophets we have Avadya. Avadya was a Ger. The Gemara says he was from Edom. That's why his nevuah is B'nei Be'abba. The Gemara B'nei Be'abba is a nevuah of it. Yeah. The Chol Elo Hamshachas v'Halos. Now it's summing up. All these Hamshachas v'Halos, both the Hamshachas through Torah and mitzvahs, which refines Gashmis and releases the spark, or Halah like through prayer or through Gatus. You're elevating sparks. The Now he's explaining how do these berudim take place. Because here's the problem. The kelim shattered. Now you have a loven of klipa. You have a world that is filled with sparks that are concealed. How do you release sparks that are concealed when they're coming from such a high place? So you have to say that you have a power that's more than the concealing power. This is a brilliant concept. You can't change the system from within the system, right? So you have to, in order to elevate something that got released, that means you're more powerful than the resistance that it's giving you. That's why he's saying now. So what is he saying? So all these amshachas, to free these sparks, these berudim, you have to have taste for seir. If you only have the power that Ishtalshlus gives you, then you have a world. In other words, let's put it this way. God created a world, Bereshis bara Elokim. Everything was fine. Then there came Chet Tzadas, and things descended and fell. If you're only going to rely on the Koyach HaBriya, the power that gives, that sustains existence, you're not going to have the power to elevate. All you have the power is to continue to sustain existence. You follow what I'm saying? Let's put it this way. Let's say a person, God forbid, falls into a deep pit. There's no way you're going to lift that person out without exertion, extra exertion. To carry someone that's not in a pit takes a certain amount of strength. But to go down that far, you can't use regular strength. You need to have a lot more strength because now you have to go to a far darker place. That's basically what he's saying here. So basically, to put it in different terms, because this goes back to Yaakov, who's higher than the Parsa, with what he did before the chain. What's going on here? Remember, we talked before in chapter Ayin Vav. He said that there's B'rei Se'elam, and there's how it was in the B'chilas Abriya. How Malchus is regularly, it's giving life to existence. But in order to, like you said, Kisei, remember this in, he said like this, Tel Sheshmai Ma'aris Mole, with a Vav, even Malchus will be a Moed HaGadol. Okay? You cannot change the world if you're going to continue to use the same energy that gives the world sustenance. So you have to go to a higher level. This is why we need Matan Torah.
That's the neshama, isn't that? The neshama is like an agent from outside.
Yeah. That's going to ultimately lead to that. But right now he's talking in the context of Yaakov and Lavan. So basically, it's almost like saying I don't know if you. I remember what sikha it was. It was a beautiful sikha. The Rebbe said there's a chayil and kodesh. I think the Hadran and the Rambam, Malamed Hey. It goes like this: the material world has a complaint. What right do you have? Come, God created lahavdil ben kodesh l'chayil. We say it every havdalah. Shabbos is Shabbos, and the weekday is weekday. Why are you coming and bringing kedusha into the weekday? You have your day. You have your domain. Why are you coming into my domain? This is the time that chayil could have. Why are you making chul and altaras hakedesh? You have your land. Why are you becoming an aggressive conqueror and conquering my territory? Where did the Rabbi say this? He speaks about it. Yeah, there's no question. There's a sikh about, where we're mechamas l'shus and mechamas mitzvah and aveda. That's what he says. So it's a very good taina. The only answer is because the one who created you and created me sent me there. And more than that, I have power to transform you. Even though you on your own are there, I need more power to transform chayil to kodesh. Needs a lot more power than to maintain kedusha. That's what he's saying now. So in order to get all this, you need a taste for seir, a special. So there's really two. Chassidus talks about. You ever see Chassidus? There's taste for seir. There's it was the lashon. I know the lashon in Hebrew. The kfi hamida. There's the amount of energy that flows into existence according to what's necessary to existence, and then there's taste for seiris. Yeah, that's more than what's measured. So to keep things going, all you need is maintain the energy of before. You want to change something, you need to bring a new energy in. Basically, in the healing they say, if nothing changes, nothing changes. You're not going to change. It's like what is the sign of insanity? Someone who keeps doing the same thing and expects different results. Right. So bottom line is, in order to change, you need to have taste for seir. So that's why there's a milchama, because you need to exert yourself more in order to redeem and free the sparks that are concealed there. That was more than what was measured and niktzav and designated in the structure of existence. The Rebbe brings this in brilliant sikha, the famous Hadran, Tav Shalom Hey. Unbelievable. We're talking about Motzei and Ein Motzei. Why the Rambam has to bring about God that's beyond existence? Because the beginning of the Rambam it says, Amud Chachas Shehu Motzei, Sheyesh Motzei Risen, Menu Nimtzu Kol Nimtzoyim. Then he says, V'im Yal Aladas Shehu Ein Motzei. If it arises in your mind that he did not, that there's not Motzei, it's not existent, then no other thing could be is existent. So the Rebbe asked the question, the threefold question. First of all, why is it Yal Aladas? What means Yal Aladas? Means it's a greater understanding. What are you talking about? Greater understanding that there's no God. Second of all, why does the Rambam bring this here? It's for halacha. Why does the Rambam bring this whole thing here? To say there's a motzei, we understand there's a God, and he told us, he gave us Torah mitzvahs. That's why I say for halachas. Why does he suddenly get into a philosophical discussion about God that's higher than, that's non-existent, so to speak? And then what's b'chlal the hava mean? Since when halacha you start talking if it doesn't exist? Where does it say such a thing? In Torah, Bereshis bara Elokim. Since when do we talk? And the Rebbe's answer is brilliant. What the Rebbe's answer is, Ein motzei doesn't mean doesn't exist. It means that he's detached from existence. That if you're Yal Aladas and you start going deeper and saying, hey, God doesn't care about existence because he's beyond existence, then nothing in the world can exist because God is removed. He has to match. So Motzei is a lower level of understanding godliness. So what's the connection to halacha? Remember the answer? Unbelievable answer. And the answer to halacha is because halacha, to change Elam Hazard that God created, you need to go back to Ein Motzei, the one to the engine room. Because if you rely just on Motzei gives Metzias existence. So Chel will say, I exist, why are you changing me? How can you change? I belong in the domain of the secular, of the profane. Why are you moving me into Kedusha? So how could we magdish a chefza that God created, a chefza, an object in existence that belongs in the domain of the secular, or belashon of Chazal, El Yenim, so you need to have Matan Teira and Eichi, a level of Ein Motzei that comes and says, I created you, so now I go back and tell you I'm beyond your existence, therefore you can change that existence. So in other words, to change Gashmistic thing to Ruchnis requires far more power than just Ruchnis. Anyway, so that's Teis V'Seiris. Ki al pi hamida the Seder Shtalshlis, because according to the measure of the cosmic order, Nimshach ha'er b'b'chinas Tzimtzum, the energy it comes concealed, and it diminishes from level to level. That's the normal progression of energy flow. And on this concealed energy, the mesachim, the curtains, and the veils. I mean, now mesachim is more. A mesach is definitely a curtain. Pasay is the cloaks, the shields, the shrouds. Okay, we'll start all the synonyms. Whatever you want to use. I guess mesach is usually less than a parsa. But regardless, ma'lim mastirim. So how could you change that? So here's what we have. You have like this. Okay, you have Shviras HaKelim, the sparks fell, they're now concealed in places. The progression of Shtalshus is more and more concealment. You go from Atzilus to Bri, Yitzira, Asiya, total concealment. And therefore the parsas that come into play won't let you redeem anything. Which is what Lavan wants, obviously. They conceal and they cover up. Levushim. Remember the Levushim that conceal. He's going further. Even the beginning of the first energy that came after this came from a tzimtzum. So you didn't begin with you didn't begin with Eid Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum. You already began with a diminished state of divine awareness. Everything, the whole process began after tzimtzum. This, what in parentheses he's adding is you could argue, you know what? 1 second. Oyer is very powerful, and the Oyer will balance out and fight the concealments. So he says no, but the Oyer itself also began with a tzimtzum, and now it's even more tzimtzum. So the levush and mesachim have power. See, a levush could do anything to Oyer lifnei tzimtzum. That's why you needed the first tzimtzum. You have to conceal that divine presence before you can have that whole progression of what's going on. In other words, you first need the etzem to be concealed, and then you bring the levushim who conceal it to the point where it is today, which could be a menagid.
You mean the harder.
Yeah, essentially. Because after the curtain, after the shield, after this veil, after this cloak, it radiates a very diminished, an increasingly diminished energy. This energy has no power to refine, to separate, and to elevate. That's what's going on. In other words, the power that creates cannot be the power that elevates. The only way this is possible is specifically there's a transmission from a higher power. That radiates and pierces even the parsa.
It does go through the parsa.
There's higher energy.
It's within the air, really, in a way.
Hold on, he's going there. Like we say by Mountain Teda, that there was a voice that was higher than the rakia. Rakia is the parsa. The voice higher than the rakia. Rakia is a veil, is a layer. And there's a voice of Teda higher than the parsa. This is an energy and light, a power that even the parsa cannot conceal. Pierces through. Obviously, there's going to be Yaakov, who has the power to pierce, but Lavan still creates the parsa. Even though this energy that's also higher also comes in a measure and in a parameter. Nevertheless, within it is also drawn or transmitted the core. And even the medida, even the measurement is also medida atzmis. Like it's known and explained elsewhere. I'll explain what it means. In other words, he's saying basically like this. We're not talking about an energy that just comes in, not just pierces, but destroys everything. Okay, he's not talking about that. What he's talking about here, that this energy has in it a power that's more than just the energy within existence, but that energy is channeled as well. So it's a very intense energy, but it's not going to destroy the kelim. Because you can have an energy, someone will say, you know what, like Rabbi comes out of the Maid after 12 years, whatever he looks at begins to burn. So he had the power not to be influenced by the world, but what happens? It's so intense, it's burning. That's not what we're talking. It has to come midah v'shir. But the midah v'shir is really, you think he's a regular guy, but he's not a regular guy. His vision is very powerful. So his 13th year, wherever he goes, he repairs. So he's basically harnessing. So he's a fire of unbelievable power, but it's channeled through Midah B'Shir, so it could be able to be manifest in existence. And even its Medida, when Rabbi in the 13th year, it's not like he had less power. He was able to channel his power, so it's a Medida Atzmis, meaning it's not a Medida because of Tzimtzum and Helam, it's a Medida because of self-control and channeling and harnessing. That's a Medida Atzmis. So like a Rebbe, of course he can come in and expose and just use all his powers. It's a far greater power where he conceals and does it in his own, more gentle way, in a more subtle way. It's much more power because his medida is coming. But say he's not. So you say, why didn't the Rebbe say anything? If he didn't say anything, it's because he didn't want to say anything, not because he's concealed or doesn't know, or because he's intimidated. Exactly, that's a medida atzmis, not an outside force. It's an example given sometimes when you write and you. It's like what's it goes? Ein etzem mechas al etzem. It says etzem. For example, when you write, you can write infinite letters. When you stop yourself from writing all the infinite letters, not because of concealment, it's because you're controlling. You willingly don't want to write more. A concealment would be with, like you said, an imposition that's stopping, like he says till now. The energy flows, and it literally diminishes, and you can't do anything about it. Then there's a diminishing that's not diminishing; it's the same intensity, but it's channeling into existence. Essentially, it's a tzaddik that's camouflaging like a regular person, but is really a force from another world, an alien that looks like a human. That's what it is. Sometimes I think you are one, by the way, too. You. For sure. But you'll never admit it, huh? Wives are real reality checks, aren't they? In case you're thinking too greatly of yourself, your wife can remind you. Okay. Yeah. This is like that. And he says this is like the Mesachim of Pasayz the Kedusha, not Klippa. Like the curtains, like the Beis HaMikdash, for example. That's a Medida Atzmis. The Parechis between one section was not because of diminishing and not letting the flow. It's a Keli, not a Levush. That's the key. It's a revealer, not a concealer, basically. Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting, because he said, you see, in other words, there's really two levels. There's real concealers where you just let opaque, you don't let any light in. Then there's the concealers like levushim, they let light in like through mashalim, but it's primarily a concealer, and it's bringing the light where it's very diminished in. And then there are concealers that are far more, they're concealing like keichus hanefesh, but their main focus is revealing, but you have to reveal it to this level so they conceal. They're not affected by the tzimtzum. It's like by Rashbi, it says he didn't have the churban. By Rashbi there was no churban. Okay. So now he says, they don't totally conceal an energy to say the shtalshlus of the cosmic order. And for sure they don't conceal the energy higher than Ishtalshus. But Love and Arami was not one of those. It says Arami, meaning Lamata. In other words, Love and Alien, yes, the Pasal Lifnei Atzilus is Taka Mesach Kedusha, Pasal Kedusha. That's why all it does is just limits the flow to Gvul. There should be Gvul of Kedusha. Remember we talked about Atzilus as Gilead Helam. But Love and Arami is already a Chiddush. Because he wanted to give power, to empower, and to strengthen and vitalize the curtains, the veils. That they should become total concealers. So in other words, there's a pasha between Atzilus and Biyah that's necessary for Biyah to come into existence. He wanted to create a complete shutdown.
If he was such a state of his he would live at himself.
Obviously minimal, because he does say minimal, but he doesn't want the bittul. He just wants to have, give me life, but don't give me the bittul. Remember we learned earlier about Ak, that in Elam Hazah you have the bittul, but they only know it because they're getting life, but they don't know there's no real bittul. They don't feel bittul. I said, It's like a child who's a real troublemaker. He comes to the parents, I want your money, but I don't want anything else. I don't want to listen to you. Valderech ki'im avnesechem hayam avdilim. The Gemara says that nothing can separate between ein afilu mashach shabarzel. What's the listen? Ein dover mafsik beinechem ubein avinu shebeshamayim ki'im avnesechem hayam avdilim. Afilu mashach shabarzel. That's the lashon. That even a curtain. Oh, that's masach, no? Even a curtain of steel curtain or barzel, cannot separate between you and God. Ki'im avnesechem hayam avdilim. So it states that masach can't conceal. The iron curtain. But your sins could. Like it says in Ageres Tshuva, chapter 5, nothing. Blocks. Right.
And it's a master that's the whole thing.
Yeah. So there's nothing that could be chetzes that can chetzes means block. Or mafsik can separate. Only your sins. So in other words, through our actions we can create a far deeper disconnection than on its own. So the world on its own can be very concealed. We even learned earlier, remember that concealment alone doesn't cause you to go against God. That you need a special bchira, special power of bchira. We learned that earlier. In tell this mimer.
Right.
Yeah, chapter 102. So, however, and that's what Lavan wanted. He wanted to create a real iron curtain, closing it up. Which means to conceal also on the transmission of Torah mitzvahs, which is of course the Aved of Yaakov. Yeah, that there shouldn't be an awakening of tshuva by Baal tshuva.
Where does this come from? It comes from
the power. That power he has. Yeah. You should. You hear what's going on here?
That's the effect of Atzilus on
No, it's the effect of Lavan. Not Atzilus.
In a couple of chapters before that, Atzilus
Huh?
That's the whole idea of the goal.
Right, exactly. This is the Gal of Lavan.
If there would be no Atzilus, what would happen would be disconnect. A couple of chapters.
That's a different discussion. That's not this at all.
But it wouldn't be.
There would be no world then. There would be no, he's saying if there was no Atzilus, there'd be no relation in this world.
We wouldn't have this.
But he's not talking about Atzilus. He's talking about the. Well, listen, there is Atzilus now. The Parsa could also stop the flow. Atzilus creates awareness in this world, but the Parsa wants to stop that awareness. That's what he's saying. Good. And Lavan is creating a Gal. Wants to, right, exactly.
How do you have such nice daughters then with all this
Levin Alien. Levin Alien. It's like we say, it's good genes. What we always like to say, we say Shoshana ben Achechim, right? We like to say is when anything God gives somebody, he takes something away. Anything he takes away, he gives. So there's, the people are very talented. The God always takes something away from them. You'll see very talented people. There's always something missing.
It's no perfection.
Exactly. That there should be no status of tshuva and about tshuva. That's strong words. Ooh.
Because I remember learning that.
That would mean somebody what fills on that side of the curtain. He wants to make sure you can't get back. You're now mine. You belong to me.
That's what I understand his daughters, because they were on that side of the curtain with him at that point.
Because it's not airtight. Nothing is airtight. I remember Yaakov came around, and he changed it to the equation. Yaakov brought it.
Already Leah was crying because she didn't.
No, but Yaakov brought in a level that's higher than the parsa.
But before that, Leah was always had eyes that were because she was crying about it.
Yeah.
Already there.
She really was crying about her father, but she couldn't say anything. There should be no revelations from Atzilus and Biyah. Yeah. Kamei Hagili, it's all coming together. Kamei Hagili, you're getting a new appreciation of Lavan, huh? He's a pretty powerful guy, this guy. It's like blocking the whole flow. I thought he was just disturbing some one dimension. The guy's like, he's the guy we got to get rid of. He's like at the door. He's blocking everything.
Multi-dimensional chameleon.
Stupid gal that he built, a mound. It's causing us sorrows. It's unbelievable. One little mound the man created 3,000 years, 3,500 years ago. A little, about a few stones.
those who learn traditional Mikra, the Chumash.
Anyone that's about Shuvah should thank Yaakov, because Lavan, that's what means Lavan wanted to kill everybody. That's what he meant. He wanted to destroy that whole...
Much worse than Esau.
In this sense, it says it's worse than Pare. Okay. Hold on. Okay, let's go on here. By the way, that's why it says in the Parsha, in this week's Parsha, what does it say? That Hashem comes to Lavan in a dream and says, all your intentions you can't do to him. That means Lavan then says to Yaakov, that had not God come to me, I would have killed you. And now, so clearly there's something happened that stopped Lavan from this type of total annihilation. Because at that point, yeah, he could have killed Yaakov and everybody. Why not? He had the power. So it's his territory, Choram, Hamas.
How do you have the power? I thought Yaakov was the taste there.
Well, let's learn further. We'll see. Maybe that's the power. Taste was said of Yaakov is Hashem causing him to say that. Like the revelation, the divine revelation that was in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, and like the revelation of prophecy by the prophets. All this, and all the signs and miracles that are higher than nature, all this would not be able to. That's what he wanted to block. He wanted to basically. It's like when you block the supply line. The Yesh Leimar, and now we're told that the parentheses doesn't have an end. So Yecheskel.
No, it says in the bottom.
Which is okay. No. This is not a parenthesis till the end of the Hemshech. Trust me. Then you could just skip it all. Let's go to the end. Let's go to the end. No, it's a few lines. We'll figure out where it is. It's a very powerful Pedic. That's what we mean by makif the klipa of Lavan. It's a very hard and tough husk. Because he's interested, he's concealing not just right. We're concealing even the Ezus and Meifshim, the Beis Hamikdash. All the powers, not just of Atzilus. He wants to conceal also Bligvul. Remember Sfira? Sipur? He doesn't want to just conceal the story of Gvul. He wants to tell you, conceal also the Mshachas. So basically, Sfiras of Atzilus of Kedusha want to tell a story. And this guy is saying, no, I don't want you to hear the story. He talks loud and he blocks out the story from flowing. That's what he wants to do. And not just, and such a tif clip, because not just stopping the Gvul. He wants to stop also the Lamaila Mishtalshlus, which is Eishus and Meifsim, Nevuah, Beis Hamikdash. Not just, yeah, in many different ways. Hitler, Stalin, in many different ways. It's like it says, when...
he has to have the power to stop Gvul.
Let's read, we'll see. I mean, Maiserav, right? I know he's working hard in my life. Like chutzpah. Huh? What? Chutzpah.
Terrorism pays.
Yeah. Chutzpah klapashmaya mahana, which is a very sad statement. That chutzpah has ability. It's used in a negative way. I mean, we also use it in the positive. Sometimes you need chutzpah, like the Baal Shem Tov Maisa, where you gather together 10 tzaddikim to pray for somebody and it didn't help. So then he gathered 10 ganovim, thieves, and it did help. So he asked them, how'd you do? What's going on? So he said he saw all the gates in heaven were locked. He needed someone to break in. The Baal Shem Tov stories as they go.
I think this is pnimi also.
Huh?
Pnimi.
It's a good one, huh? So we all have a little. It's like learning 6 things from a Ganav. You got to. So you need chutzpah both ways. Because tzaddikim, you got to. There's a structure to deal with, and the Ganav, let's just go. We'll find a way. Yeah. The holy thief. The holy thieves. Okay. So chutzpah klapashmani. What's the context of the Gemara? Do you know chutzpah klapashmani?
He made a circle.
Oh, that's a mile. That's l'mal yusa, however.
That helps, but it was a shtickle that hung a little bit. the way he did it.
Yeah, okay, so chutzpah helps Klapper Shmaya. Why? Because Klapper Shmaya is a structure, and chutzpah breaks through the structure. He's obviously talking here the negative. That this clip is such a strong clip, chutzpah, it's like we talk about Amalek. That's chutzpah. He's able to stand against and oppose the divine revelation. It's known and explained elsewhere. The interesting thing is with Bilam, if we remember, we learned this by the Bechira thing. Bilam, Balak hired him to do this. But Bilam, of course, was a Navi and said, I can't. So Bilam was not allowed by God to do it. But unfortunately, there are people that God did allow. But Bilam had done what he'd done. Bilam gave later the Eitzah, but that was not Alza Navi. That was Alza Chochem Odav Navi. He was wise and shrewd, so he gave an Eitzah how to get the Jews to kill themselves. But he couldn't destroy, because that's not what God wanted then. But then God, unfortunately, has given people power. Nebuchadnezzar, Hitler, and so on and so forth. So, this type of chutzpah has the ability to be menaged elikus, which is a very powerful klipa. Amalek. How it's possible is because God conceals.
He gave him power. It's not really menaged elikus, because if you think about it, He gave him that power.
Yeah, but they didn't have to do it. The question is, what's the point here? They will be punished for what they did.
Understand? It's not really. It's like they have the power to block it. They were given that.
They get a taavos.
Why will they be punished then?
Because I guess they have bechira.
You always have bechira.
Yeah, and they got taavos there, and they can reject it.
But anyway, Lavan did what he did. He built this. This is what they want to do. Don't think of it as an individual, personal. Think of it as a force. We have within us a force called the Yetzer Hara that wants to block out godliness. Simple as that. How it's possible is because the divine is concealed. Obviously, that's why. He's talking here in in psychological terms. The same thing, the desires and the pleasures, they're also from the makif the klipa. What do taavos and tainugim do when a person has a taiva? Anybody knows what a taiva means here? A taiva means when you have this obsessive desire for something that's not holy, and you cannot stop it. What is it doing? It's so powerful, it blocks you from anything that is godly, which is a real chutzpah, because its whole power comes. God gives power to everything. You have life, God gave you life and blessed you, and here you're going and taking the power that was given to you and doing something that's completely against what God wants. So if you think about it, how is that possible? It doesn't make sense. Like I said yesterday, Ein Adam Meis Panav B'fnei Baal Cheveh. But there's chutzpah. So either you're not an Adam, you're a behemoth, or it's just the power. It doesn't make sense. That's why we say Ein Adam a person doesn't do a sin. Elim ken nichnus b'ruach shtus. It has to be a shtus. There has to be some power of concealment here that's very intense. Because logically, look how many people have made mistakes. They know logically it's not the right thing to do, but the power of the moment is so powerful. Later you regret it, and later you realize I wasn't so powerful. But at the moment, it's impossible to control. This is an uncontrollable taiv. She said, this is the klipa, this is mailim gamal agili. Ukamoy hashakua b'yesh rachman etzlam b'tainugim gashmim. Like a person who is, God forbid, fazunkin, deeply submerged, deeply consumed, obsessed with physical pleasures. Shema'avid be'emes kol chelki teva shebenefesh. When in truth he's completely destroying. Ma'abed, he's destroying all the goodness in his soul. It's fascinating, this, by the way. Addicts who go to rehab in 12-step will always talk about this. They always talk about how my soul, a cancer entered into my mind that completely destroyed me. Because that's what an addiction is. An addiction will destroy the person. And the person who's doing it while he's knowing he's being destroyed. That's what it does, a real addiction. So how's that possible? That's the power of this type of concealment. It's concealing even the healthy parts of you, which goes against the nature. Every human being wants to self-preserve. Who wants to self-destruct? Yet addiction allows a person to self-destruct. That's called, shakua b'yeser. There's only reason from them.
could destroy the good, or you cover it over?
You don't fully destroy, obviously, but you do enough destruction, you destroy your life. You destroy your life. There was this book I read, unbelievable. There's a writer, his name is David Carr. What's the name of the book? I mentioned it here once. Guns. Something in the night. So he was a coke addict, and him and his girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. And then they had 2 children. And they still remained on coke. They tried to straighten their lives out. And he was so obsessed. He says his wife went away.
He took his kids in the car?
Yeah, David Carr.
He took his kids in the car and he went to...
Guns in the Lonely Night? No, it'll come to me in a minute. It's a chilling story.
He went to a place...
Yeah, I told the story. So he went to a coke house, crack house.
With his kids.
With his kids. It was a cold winter day.
Because he couldn't leave them in the house.
Right. He left them in the car, put on the heater or whatever, and went into the crack house for his thing. Babies. And, in crack, he had no idea how long he was in there. He doesn't even remember how long he was. But he was so obsessed. He did it, and he came out. He thought it was 5 minutes in his mind, but it was hours. And when he walked out, he realized the kids are there. And the car was all heated up. He didn't know. And he opened the door, and thank God, they were alive. And he realized at that moment how strong this addiction, because the denial, he said, okay, I'm taking he didn't justify anything. He writes, it's a very powerful, very, very powerful book about addiction. Now he's a New York Times writer, he's a business writer. He's a very good writer, but he wrote a story of his life. But just to show how you dehumanize yourself. Look at alcoholics. Is it natural for a person to live in the street? People live in the street. And it's not just poverty, they destroy their own lives. It's possible to destroy a life. It's tragic. God should up it. Obviously, you need factors to lead you there. It doesn't just happen overnight. But there are different things. Zalman the Shikar, by the way. Zalman the Shikar. I know him for many years. He was a very successful businessman. Then he had chronic back pain. And he could not get rid of the pain 24/7. So he started drinking to get rid of the pain. And he became a major alcoholic. He told me once. I remember as a bochum, we once dressed him up, gave him a hotel for a night to clean him up. And we thought maybe we'll get into this. Okay, it lasted. A week later, he's still in the same suit. We knew that he's back to drinking. And he told me, that's what he told me. He has a son, a very successful lawyer. He's a very smart guy. He's like a chassidish guy. But his line is that you drink to submerge your tsaras, and then you find out that tsaras float. That's what he's told me. Yeah. The point is, I'm just using examples. The Rebbe Rashab, I don't know if he's talking about an addict here, but what he's describing is literally this. I want to give an example. It doesn't make any sense. This is, I'm calling it human dignity, but this is the elokus. You're destroying the whole good that's inside of you. How could a person do such a thing? Gamblers do this. Sex addicts do it. This is what first of all, you minimize. You don't realize how addicted you are. You start taking money. You start justifying everything. I deal, unfortunately, with people like this, and they live in delusions. Usually what happens is not you wake up one morning. Usually you destroy so bad that you have no choice. Like your wife throws you out. Or you get caught. Right, rock bottom. Or like this guy, where he suddenly realized, by him that was the thing. He saw those kids, he couldn't believe what he did. He said, God gave me a gift that the kids could have died.
Or he would have been in jail for
or whatever it is. But but the kids got it. A lot of people also, kids help. But that also means he has some sensitivity. But people destroy their own children. And addiction is addiction. It's God forbid. Basically, it's like something take control of you that's goes against human nature. Which I'm using contemporary examples. The Rebbe Rashab is probably talking more about a person who's just a grubber young. Right, exactly. Right, exactly. He maybe ate an extra canadle.
What's the taavos you had in 1912?
Yeah. But bottom line is, okay, but this can be applied today. That's why I'm saying it. But that's the shema abed be'emes kol chelki tevish benefesh.
What's left over?
Well, there's always left over because there's always a God at the end of the day. The question, however, is how hard it's going to be. Look, addicts come out of it. People have gone to 12-step programs. There's no such thing as total destruction. Total.
What's
Total?
What's the
What do you mean? These good parts. Means anything that's good. The good parts, the healthy parts.
It's covering it up by this.
Ma'abed, he says more than covering. Remember, he was ma'abed. What's the lashon by Arami Ovid? That's the whole point. And that's why he's using abed. Ovid Abi. He wants to destroy. Now he's going. Like an example, taiva and kovid. Desire and honor. Kovid. Vanity, maybe. The taiva b'chinas pnimi de klipa. A taiva is pnimi, is the imminent, is more of an internalized klipa. Why? Why is that? Because it's a taiva, you want it.
You're doing something else.
Right, also you're internalizing, something you're gaining, you're like ingesting, so to speak. A kovid is makif de klipa, shezeh gerua yeser. And kovid is worse.
It's hadier.
Because it's gerua yeser, it's far worse because it's makif. What is makif? It's not, kovid doesn't mean you're internalizing it, it's makif.
Kovid means vanity, literally?
Shemi shereitzel yes mechubed.
No, that's what I was doing, it's honor.
I said vanity.
You said vanity.
Well, the kovid literally, 1 second. Kovid, think of a person who has a taiva for kovid. He has a desire that people should, what? Should,
Look up there.
not more than just look up. Should honor him all the time. You know the story they say, I think it was Kalmanovich, one of these Rosh Hashivas, it was a big fundraiser for Panovich or for Mir. Kalmanovich, it was Kalmanovich, and there was the other one, Kahneman. I'm not sure which one it was. So he was once invited to go to a Shabbos somewhere. So, he said, okay, he's waiting to hear like what kibbudim they're going to give him, what. So they said, yeah, we'll give you, by them they give shlishi. And you speak. Okay, fine, he's coming. And they gave him all the honors, the red carpet, the whole treatment. And as much as cover they give him, they see still somewhat sour, he's not happy. So they said to him, what's we gave you, we announced your name with all the kibbudim and everything. So he answered like this. He says in the Gemara, it says that in Sanhedrin, then it came to Yerovam and David, so it says, the Eibusha says, Ani, Ba'ata, Uben Yishai. That will all come together. Nelech, right, we'll go in Gan Eden. So Yerovam asked the Eibusha, Mi Bareish, who's going to go first? What's the question? It says, Ata, Uben Yishai. It says you first and then Ben Yishai. Why was he asking? God already said his name first. So why is he asking? He said he wanted to hear it a second time. Huh?
Hearing the second time the story.
That's right, that's what bothered him. He wants to hear it a second time. The covet. So this is a taiva for covet. They already gave him all the honors. That's a good thing I said. But it's a good prat in the Gemara. What bothered you? You already said Ata ben Yishai. I love that.
What is it said? If you want people to think hardly of you, that's the type of covet.
No. We all right. Covet is not self-esteem.
No, it's not.
Covet is a person for no other reason than just feeling that he wants to be. The guy doesn't even. You never saw this in Crown Heights. People just want covet. Some people want covet. They want recognition. Covet. No, we're not talking about a healthy desire to be respected. That's not what we're talking here. That's not the taiva of covet. He says, like he says, that the taiva of covet metzina adam min ha'elam. That's taiva of covet. He's explaining this Mishnah. So taiva is an internal klipa. This is actually the most geshmak, the easiest parts in learning Ayin Beis, because you really get into. This is far more familiar than the abstract edus of bligvul lifnei atzimtzum. What does it say? Love and Aram. He speaks to us more than love and Elyon. Okay, very nice. Okay, so what's the shamisha reitz elias mechubed be'enei habriyas? Someone who wants to be. That's why I use vanity more than someone who wants to be mechubed be'enei habriyas in the eyes of the creatures, in the eyes of people. He wants to be recognized, right? That distances him very much from the light of kedusha. The whole thing of holiness and sanctity is bittul, selflessness, and putting yourself aside. Basically, it's self-worship. That's what he's talking about. He wants people to worship him. That's really what we're talking about.
Does bittul coexist with self-esteem?
100%. That's the honor of it. I'll explain in a minute. Let's just see. And with COVID, it's the opposite. It's hergish atzmei b'yesod. It's an increased sense of self.
It sounds like Gaiva more because it's like the opposite antithetical.
But it doesn't want to say. Not saying gaiva. He's saying COVID for a reason, because COVID is levushim, by the way. Right. That's probably why he's saying COVID, because that's the levushim.
You know, it says that the levushim called the.
Yeah. Right. That's my honor. Yeah. U'kamoi came b'malbushei COVID. Here it goes. Here. U'kamoi came b'malbushei COVID. The same thing with garments, with the basically majestic garments, I guess. Distinguished, dignified garments. Shemalbishim makif mesanefesh. That enclose and surround the nefesh. So COVID is not an internal thing; it's more of an external thing. You're being honored. It's not a taiva where you, let's say, a taiva for food or a taiva for something else. That's internal. This is you're being honored. It's like the around, like he says, being dressed up, like when Haman, right? So he tells them levush malchus. They should go with this and dress him up in the king's garments. And Haman wanted that for himself. Shemalbishim makifim es hanefesh. Esnemtem zeir arum. In Yiddish. So COVID completely, esnemtem zeir arum, it increasingly surrounds him. It's really not a good translation. Esnemtem zeir arum. It's totally all-consuming, basically. Yeah, all-encompassing. Shemeshuka bezeh, he's immersed in it, submerged in it, b'yesod, increasingly shenegei le'me'ed. And it's extremely important to him. I'm sure there's someone listening to this mimer when the Rebbe Rashab said it that he was speaking to. It sounds that way. Maybe it means us. Ukanida b'chush, like we see bashain perlach. How do you say that in English? We see with our own eyes. Literally. We literally see the mishu b'klipa zu, the malbushe kovid, someone that's in this clip of garments of wearing, dressing in this type of honorable clothing. Someone that's into fashion, that look good, is far more negay. It's more important to him.
I don't think it means literally somewhere.
More important to his negay. More negay. How does it say? It's like more important and more priority to him than someone who's involved in eating and drinking, and etc. One second. And because it completely shamalbish, you don't think he means physical garments? He means both. He has to mean also physical, because he says a kamoy kain. If not, what's the kamoy kain? He started saying that he's covered, and then he says kamoy kain malbushe covered. I don't think he means only physical. It's an example. When a person is not a king and wants to dress like a king, treat me like a king, so I'll dress up like a king. Everyone thinks I'm the king. There's an element in that. Obviously, it doesn't mean only dress. It means the treatment of you, like that. Anyway, so it's malbish. The thing is, it encloses and surrounds ma'edus hanefesh, his whole spirit. So it completely conceals on the divine. He wants to explain why COVID is a far deeper klippah than taiva. Because it's complete, all-encompassing. Well, malbushim both physically, but also literally, but also figuratively. Like this, when you have a taiva, so you have the taiva for the moment, let's say for a piece of food. It says food and drink. Let's keep it simple like that. So you have a taiva, and then it may be all-consuming because right now you want that, you desire it, but covered is like your whole personality. You're coming to shul and you're waiting to see. I was once by a dinner, and there were some very distinguished people there. And then I saw and I realized, oh, my friend, I don't respect anybody on this earth. Two people who I thought were very. And when they came, and like after the reception, they said, "So where are you sitting? Where are you sitting?" And I could see how they suddenly stooped to being like 2-year-olds. It was all about, are they sitting close enough to the dais? What will it look like? It was all about impression. Okay. That's why covet is much deeper than anything. It's all about what do you look like, what's your status. And that is a makif thing that consumes the whole of you. It's your identity. A taiva is not your identity. You have a taiva, between you and your taiva. This is an okazim, where am I going to be sitting? Like that. Like, I want to hear it again.
That's the purpose of marriage.
To give you covet or take it away?
Take it away.
Oh, depends who you're married to. Or depends what you deserve.
It's not the stupid of dignity.
God sends everyone what they deserve. Everybody means it. So this completely conceals. That's why covet is even more than taiva. Because your whole identity is about, am I being honored? So where's there room for God? There's no bitl. A taiva, you can have bitl and have a taiva. You're a battleika guy, and then you had it for an hour. You had a taiva for something, you went for it. You made a mistake. But covet is this type of all-consuming thing, and usually people like covet. And right. And covet is not a thing for an hour. If you want covet, you basically want it all the time. He doesn't say that, but it's interesting. I'm getting a taiva for covet just reading this. I don't know if the Rebbe Hashab is achieving what he wanted. Okay. I just wrote an email to somebody a few years ago. Came to me for advice about something, and I felt, I don't know, someone that we both know. I didn't know him, but I trusted him because he said to me to be confidential. He's a professional, so I said to him, "Okay, I'll tell you." And my advice to him was that he shouldn't pursue this and this shidduch, so to speak. But I made him promise me 5 times that what I say to him stays between us. It didn't stay between us. He right away told the person, and right away, I became the enemy, etc. Okay, fine. So, I didn't bother. I didn't carry a grudge. I meet him 5-6 years later, recently, and he says to me, "What? It didn't work out. Maybe you could help me." I said, "Last time I recall, you didn't listen." So he writes me an email a few days ago. Why are you being so rude with me? I was emotionally distraught, and I didn't think straight, and is that how the Rebbe would want you to behave? He was giving me a lecture. And he's a professional in his field. So I wrote back to him without mincing words. I was like furious. I wrote to him, "This is not about you, my friend. You breached the trust. There's nothing to do. Everyone has a right to make a mistake." He's still focusing on himself. He still doesn't even remember. I said, "Do you recall that you breached a trust, a promise you made to me that you would not share? And that's what you called me for, solicit me advice. I didn't want to say anything. You insisted I share. I did. Made that mistake, me. And you went ahead and breached that trust 5 minutes later." And I'm waiting to hear his response. But I saw a person completely self-consumed. He can't even hear this. He's busy. I should have rachmanis while he was emotionally distraught. No, so I wrote to him. Oh no, why did I say that? I said, "Doesn't bother me that you didn't listen to my advice. It won't be the first person that didn't." That was what I wanted to say. Okay. In my work, you don't get so much covered. I can tell you that. It looks externally sometimes like that, but because when you really deal with the raw nerves of people, that's not when covet starts coming. The glamour. Yeah, you write a book. People say, "Oh, nice book. It changed my life," etc. But you get to the nitty gritty. It's not so. In engine room, things are always not as clean, like on the stage. Okay, I don't know why I mentioned that. Whatever. Maybe if I'll tell him to learn chapter Kuf Ches and Ayin Beis on YouTube if he wants to hear my message. It's embedded in the middle of there. You're like secret messages. Just like the Rebbe Hashab is speaking to somebody, I'm speaking to somebody.
To get the message,
I'm saying this to all of you out there that this applies to. And remember, I'm not saying any names. Like the Tzemach Tzedek said, I'm a hat maker. I make hats of different sizes. If it fits, that's who I meant. Okay. It's a very powerful piece here. So if you know anyone that's like, we used to say, a light from covet. People suffer, a light from covet. He suffers from covet. Means he suffers from desiring too much. Yeah. The Rebbe told my father actually once, you can get him a bissel covered. You should give him some respect in the newspaper. Recognition. That's the word. Recognition is the right word, not the positive sort. And my father said, because the Rebbe smiled. The Rebbe said, because covered is from the dvarim was ein lahem sof. As much as you give, you can always give more people. It's not like a thing that ends. Because we say in the morning, Eila dvarim she'ein lahem sof, right? Like Teira and so on. Ein lahem shir. So this is also something, but the negative and the klippa. Because money, you could only, let's say you have $1 million, you could distribute. But covered, you can give billions of people and nobody is diminished. Yeah. Well, if you know somebody really is obsessed with COVID, you could understand this in a very deep way. Okay. Okay, so what we have now is all the parentheses to explain COVID. So COVID has that power as the klippa of makif. That's like lavan, basically. Makif the klippa. Basically, lavan is chachma the klippa, makif the klippa. So he's both taiva and COVID. All this is to come to explain how the parsa is such that has such power to cover up completely even elikus, which is essentially self-destructive as well, and that's what he's talking about, how COVID completely, because all thing of kedusha is bittul. And here's the opposite, the ultimate, the diametric opposite of bittul, of selflessness. V'gam, another reason, mipnei sheshemen ma'ed es hatzir shalei. That's a good expression, I like that. Because a person who's into his recognition of COVID, he's very much protecting his tzir, what he should look like. In other words, he stands in front of a mirror for a few hours. When you're in a sharper mood, you meet somebody, I say, how many hours did you stand in the mirror? Everyone's insulted by that. No one wants to know. How'd you know? Because nobody, standing in the mirror is one of these personal, selfish things people do. Vanity, So if you ask people, how many hours in your life do you spend in the mirror? How many hours a day do you spend in the mirror? So that was a problem with Salsa B'Saira when he, We're not talking about Yosef here. We're talking about people spend more hours than Yosef. Yosef, whatever, if you say it was a mistake, but he had plenty of other qualities. He ended up running away from Potiphar's wife. So he saw his tzir, the yeknei of Yaakov Avinu. So in other words, in addition that it consumes him completely, which is also hepech habitl, because bitl is, like I said, taiva, while it consumes you, but you can still be a bitl dika person. But COVID, the whole COVID is the opposite. It's about my recognition. So it's the ultimate opposite of bitl. It also is protecting his tzir. It's an expression. If you know the Hebrew, it's a gewaldik, right? That's Beis mentioned was Hashem and tzir shaleh. That's why in Yeshivim, the guys that wouldn't want to make a kula, these were the people they wanted to break, because a kula was like, what do you mean, how can I turn my head over and, it's tumble sauce. Because it's breaking the tzir. There was a guy in Ayin Yeshiva who would go to sleep every night. He would take his yarmulke, fold it, and put it on his nightstand. He would wear perfect pajamas, and he had slippers, and so I remember a guy went and he was at tzir. Even when he went to sleep, he had a tzir. So I remember, like he went to the bathroom, he probably folded his pants and left them outside. This type of thing. Nothing should get creased. He was a tzir guy. So I remember one guy went and, besides the fact that when the bochum decided, guys like that, they threw into the mikveh, in their best clothing. That was number one. Number two, what they did was someone went in the middle of the night and they took a yarmulke and they made it with, like a party, with a rubber band. So he woke up in the morning, with the yarmulke. That was like.
Every Shabbat, throw people out of the yeshiva if the yarmulke was off in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
The few that ever used to check.
Okay.
So before the gal that Logan constructed, the lower gal, so to speak, then everything flowed. Before that happened, was everybody, all these, is that why it was such a Zorah? Because everything, people came unchecked from the higher levels? We're going to get there. He's middle of talking now about Lavan, of something that conceals even the big Kedusha. Remember, the whole point was that in order to challenge the pasuk, you need a gili from above. But here we're talking actually a pasuk that challenges even the gili from above, even Beis HaMikdash. We're going to get, that's the whole point where he's leading to. He's speaking Aveda right now. And in Kedusha, you need to have explicitly the opposite, losing your tzura, losing your personality. Because if you're locked in your perspective and what I want to look good, you're not open to any growth. This is the key to all. Either you're open or you're not. If you're completely trapped, so the first point he made was it completely consumes you, and it's hepech habitl. Bitl is to put yourself aside, and here you're worshiping yourself. That's the first thing. And here the second thing is, there's a shemer asatzir. So you feel yourself, and now you're also protecting your identity. And the whole point of Kedusha is to go beyond your identity. Hefsed atzura, to lose your identity, hachitzenis, your outer identity, or shape, or your outer image. If you're into your image, you're worshiping your image, how are you ever going to grow? You're going to go to Atzilus, forget about Asir Ruchnis. You can't even get out of your own stupid Tzir. ומישל לבושים נגים לי, הרי הוא שמר עצמי מעיד, מהפסד הצורה החיצונית. And someone whose garments, oh man, alive. I'm sure by that Fabrengen, when he said this man, there were a few people standing there, they looked very sharp or something. You know, they came in their best, dressed their best for the Maimer in Ayin Beis. Yeah, I don't know. That's what it sounds like to me. So someone whose nevushim are very, because this is how the Rabbeim would speak. They talk as a ruchnius, but they were talking to somebody that's chizgiputzt a bisschen zu viel. It's a cool stickle here, huh?
Why do we say Ba'asher v'Hakobo together? We said them both, but Asher is good.
Listen, let's finish what we're saying. Maybe we'll have the answer. Someone whose garments, you see, he's talking garments. He's not just talking, he's talking both. Look, but see, someone whose garments are very important to him. He really protects himself from losing this image. Like, like I see people, you could see right away, every 5 minutes they're checking whether the crease in their pants is still straight. Or they keep going to the mirror to see if their tie is straight. You could catch them sometimes doing these things. So a person like that, he's completely into it. So a person like that is not going to any spiritual journey. That you can rest assured. Because he's so protective of his tzura chitzenis. And a tumah, something is a little off. Like the Rebbe once said, that they make sure the socks match the tie and all that. And this is a very powerful resistance and block. Godel made, he says, to the Aveda, to the service of feeling and sensing godliness in your soul. You understand? Yeah. He's busy with it's like someone who's busy with he's busy, right? Exactly. The parenthesis probably ends after he says, after this parenthesis. And look what it says, else Rabbi Klippas HaMolek, by the Klippa, the husk of HaMolek, he doesn't allow himself to be excited by any divine thing with hazah chutzpah. Like, leave me alone, or, like, who are you? And arrogance. Same thing is here by Lovan, mitzad ha'taiva de levushim. Same thing here, the taiva of levushim. See, he went beyond the taiva of covet now. It's the taiva of levushim. Yeah, he doesn't allow that there should be any divine sense feeling. Because through which he will lose his outer appearance. It's his image. So he's not ready to hear anything else. So this ends the big parentheses. That start of Yeshnam. It's a double ending here, probably. And now he goes back to what this parsha does. Should we continue or should we stop here?
No, I think we should stop.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, you could definitely have a chapter. So we'll stop here. One second, please. We did now part 2 of chapter 108, page 209, through the top of 210.